All right, ladies and gentlemen, work with me here as we go over deductive reasoning. Now, inductive reasoning, we will talk about a little bit later. And the simplest way of describing inductive reasoning is using research and data to make your point. So you're going to take all the research, all the observations of a thing, and that's how you come to your conclusion. Now, deductive reasoning is going to be a little bit different. We're going to put it in a format. We're putting it in order to come to a conclusion. Okay, so deductive reasoning uses a valid format. What does that look like? Well, let me show you here. So remember we talked about arguments. Arguments are a stance on an issue where you use reasons to come to a conclusion. What do you know? This looks very similar. The major premise here is your categorical statement, your main argument, the thing you're trying to put a stance on. Your minor premise, right? So these are all in different order. Your minor premise here is your reasonings, your examples, or your cases, right? Your things that kind of explain why you make that decision. And then you come to the conclusion, the therefore. Therefore, I believe because blah, blah. Okay, so let's give you a little bit of an example of what we would call a classic syllogism. This order that you see here, this is a syllogism. There are different categorical syllogisms that I'm going to show you, but this would be the classic. Now, the classic you're going to see very often where it says that all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Now, I'm going to give you a little bit more into that. I'm going to make the argument that all men are mortal. That's my argument. That's my stance. I'm saying that all men are mortal. Now, I need an example. Well, Socrates is a man, right? Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. Do you see how I'm making an example there? Our goal here is we want our major premise, our categorical statement, our minor premise, which is our example, to come to our conclusion. Now, you might be asking, how do we make that work in a real world? Let me show you. Okay, so we are going to use Geoffrey here. You're just going to work with me, guys, okay? You're going to remember this because Geoffrey is not forgettable, okay? Do you guys ever remember that toy store? I don't want to grow up. Okay, I'm aging myself. Anyway, so we've talked about our classic syllogism, but let me show you some of the categorical syllogisms. And some of our categorical syllogisms are going to have some different names that I'm going to need you to remember. First, we're going to start with modus ponens. Modus ponens, ladies and gentlemen. Now, modus ponens, you might be asking, the fuck is that? Well, let me show you. Modus ponens. All right, modus ponens. You like my beautiful handwriting? This is I'm so high tech here, y'all. It's wonderful. Modus ponens. This is how we read it. Here's my argument. Here is my reasoning or example, and here's my conclusion. So my argument here is if A, then B. I say that if it's an A, it's also a B. So that means, oh, it's an A, therefore I'm going to say it's a B. All right. So what are some examples of that? Let's say that Geoffrey here. So Geoffrey, he plays baseball. Geoffrey's really, really good at baseball. And so Geoffrey over here is in the playoffs. All right. So the question is here, if he wins the playoffs, if he wins the playoffs, then B, he's going to go to the championship. Okay, so my statement, my argument, my stance here is if Geoffrey wins that playoff game, he's going to the championship. So we're going to have to ask you, Geoffrey, how'd you do on that baseball game? Right? So if he wins this playoff, he's going to the championships. What is our answer? He says, A, he won the playoffs, therefore Geoffrey's going to the championships. He's so excited he can't even contain himself. If he wins the playoffs, then he goes to the championships. He's won the playoff. He's going to the championships. Go get it, Geoffrey. Woohoo! Modus ponens, ladies and gentlemen. All right. Modus ponens. Now, there's another categorical syllogism that we are going to cover, and that is modus tollens. Modus tollens would actually be the not version of modus tollens. If that doesn't make sense to you, that's okay. I'm going to show you what that looks like. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we have modus tollens. If A, then B. Not B, therefore not A. Oh, I don't go, now what? Now what do we do? Right? If you're an A, then you're a B. There's not a B. There's no B. Therefore not A. Okay, I think you can read it other ways too, but let's give you an example. Let's give another example with Geoffrey. So Geoffrey was working really hard at that championship game. They did great. It's fantastic. But now he's sick. And Geoffrey came to me and he's like, Mom, my throat's sick. What do I do? And I'm like, all right, let's do this. So if A would be if you have strep throat, then the test I'm about to give him, which is a strep throat test, if I give him this test and it's positive, that means Geoffrey has strep throat. Okay. So if Geoffrey has strep throat, A, then the test will be positive, B. All right. So now I've taken the test and I've looked at it and it turns out not B. It is not positive. That means that Geoffrey does not have strep throat. Therefore, he's going to have to go to school or stay home. I don't know what he's got. He's sick. He's got something going on. So again, Geoffrey, if he has strep throat, it's probably because I'm strangling him. If Geoffrey has strep throat, then the test will be positive, but the test was not positive. Therefore, Geoffrey does not have strep throat, which is good because I just want to be real close to him and I want to get sick. So thank you very much, Geoffrey, for being another example of modus tollens. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's move on to, we're going to set this here to chain argument. All right, chain argument. Let's get there. Okay, so chain argument is a little bit different, but also similar. Now, remember when I'm showing you, we have, this is our minor premise. Actually, I'm going to give you another little example here. Just kind of, when I talk about if, then, not, and therefore, these, remember that's the arguments, that's our minor premise, major premise, our minor premise, and our conclusion. By the way, everything's backwards for me, so like my brain's got to like calibrate as I'm doing this. So this is our major premise. This is our minor premise, and here's our conclusion. And I have to say that because when we look at chain argument, it might be a little confusing. It might be, but it's not, because here's still our major premise. This is our main argument we're trying to make. If A, then B. If B, then C. This right here, this is our major premise. This is our main statement we're trying to make, our categorical statement, our argument, as it were. So here's our argument, if A, then B. If B, then C. And we're going to give the statement that A. So if A, then B, then C, we go all the way through. If it's A, then it will be C. We can state that. So A, we know it's true, therefore C. And you might be asking yourself, the fuck is happening here? So we're going to talk about little Mr. Geoffrey, okay? Geoffrey, where's your hat? Where'd you put your hat? I don't know where he put his hat. Doesn't really matter. Damn, that was going to be really cute. Well, anyway, he had a little graduation cap. Whatever. The reason why Geoffrey had a little graduation cap, which I can't find, is because he wants to get good grades and graduate. Geoffrey, I am very proud of him. He works very hard. He studies. It's not easy to be a critical thinker, Geoffrey, especially when your head is all full of fluff. Okay? So he wants a good grade in class, but in order to do that, he needs to get high test scores. So if Geoffrey wants to get a good grade in class, then B. So if A wants to get a good grade, then he has to do good on the tests. Well, if he's going to do good on the tests, if he wants to do good on the test, he's got to study, right? So if he wants good grades and he wants to graduate, then he's going to have to get good grades. I mean, if he wants to graduate, he's got to get good grades on his test. And in order to get good grades on his test, he needs to study. So if A, then B. So if he wants good grade in class, he needs to get good scores. If he wants good scores, if B, then he needs to study. Therefore, then C. So let me phrase that a little bit clearer for you. If I want good grades in class, then I need good test scores. If I need good test scores, then I have to study. So it all comes down to Geoffrey. He needs to study. So if he wants to graduate, if A, all right, then B, he needs to get good grades. If he needs to get good grades, then he needs to study, okay? So if he needs good test scores, then he needs to study, all right? Therefore, if I want good grades in class, he needs to study. If A, then C, okay? It's a chain argument. It goes all the way through, right? Later we'll talk about slippery slope, which is going to it's a little reminiscent, but it's a fallacious argument because it doesn't actually lead from A to C. So, Geoffrey, you want a good grade in class, we got to do good on the tests. If you want to do good on the tests, you have to study, okay? So, he wants a good grade in class, therefore, He needs to study. Okay, all right, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that was enough for you. And forgive me for saying ladies and gentlemen quite often. You all know that I'm including all peoples and all things in all ways. So just doing what I can to get through with you. All right, here we go. Disjunctive syllogism. Disjunctive syllogism. This one's pretty easy. Here we go. Our argument is either A or B. It's going to be one or the other. Disjunctive, right? Here's our, it's going to be either A or B. Well, it's not B, therefore it must be A. All right. So an example is Geoffrey's phone is either at Sarah's house or it's at work. Well, it's not at Sarah's house, therefore it must be at work. Okay, so Geoffrey, you're going to have to go back to work and go pick up your phone because first of all, you left it. How could you do that? All right, so disjunctive syllogism is super easy. Again, if A, it's either A or B, either or. Disjunctive is an either or statement. Okay, if it's not here, then it's there. Make it super easy on yourself. Now we're going to do argument by elimination. An argument by elimination. If any of y'all have vertigo issues like I do, I have vestibular issues, I apologize profusely for the chaos in which I am ensuing right now. Argument by elimination. All right, so again, we've got A, B, or C. We've got either A. It's either A, it's either B, or it's either C. Remember, argument by elimination. Remember POE, process of elimination, very similar. For those of you who took all the tests that you had to take to get to college. All right, so argument by elimination. So I'm going to make the argument that it's either going to be A, or it's going to be B, or it's going to be C. It's going to be one of those threes. Well, my reasoning, I find that it's not going to be, it's not C. Therefore, the logical conclusion would be A. Therefore, A. So an example here is, we're going to go back to try and find Geoffrey's phone. Geoffrey, okay, has given his phone to, oh, we're missing someone. Give me a second. Look how little this guy is. Okay. So Geoffrey has given his phone to either Mike, Carrie, or Travis. All right, so either Mike, Carrie, or Travis has Geoffrey's phone. Okay, dun dun dun. Who's got it? Let's find out. Okay, well, we know that Travis doesn't have it, so we can get rid of him. And then we know that Carrie doesn't have it. It turns out Mike has his phone. So it wasn't A. I'm sorry, it wasn't Travis, he was C. It wasn't Carrie, she was B. It turns out it was Mike who had the phone. All right, process by elimination. Pretty stinking easy. These are some examples. You can use these if you want 4 examples that we're going to be using in the feedback. Feedback vocabulary. You're going to have to use some of these for the vocabulary. So if you want to use my examples with Geoffrey and Mike and Carrie and Travis, you can do that. Okay. All right, so next, really, really quick, we're going to talk about an entomeme. So an entomeme, this should be really fun, but it's a little complicated. Let me get to my papers here. Where'd it go? Let's do disjunctive. Okay, well, I don't know where I did the other one. Oh, it's so far on the other side of the room. We're going to let it be. Okay, so I'm going to grab it because it's going to get easier this way. Absolute chaos in here. Is either this or a song, and I couldn't do a song. It wasn't going to work. Okay, so when we talk about an entomeme is missing one of the premises, okay? So an entomeme comes to a conclusion, but it's missing one of the premises, okay? So let me see if I can do a good example here. It's so argument, remember we have an argument, and so an entomeme is an argument in which one of these isn't here. It's just assumed. It's not stated, but the conclusion gives us maybe an assumption here. So an example would be, he could not have been murdered because I've known him since he was a kid. Well, the thing that's missing, I've known him since he was a kid. He couldn't have done the murder. The minor premise that we're missing there is the assumption is the knowing that he was innocent by nature, right? So the hidden premise is that he was innocent by nature and could never have murdered. He couldn't have murdered because I've known him since he was a kid. The assumption being his natural, he was innocent by nature. Okay. Let's do with a name like Colgate, it has to be good. So the assumption here is that the hidden premise is that Colgate is a very prestigious company and that therefore it's good. Okay, I hope you all can see that. Sorry, it's kind of, I'm getting really excited over here, just in your face. Okay. So the idea here, Colgate, it's with a name like Colgate, it has to be good, with the assumption being that Colgate is a very prestigious company, and because their name's on it, it's going to be good. Do you see what I'm doing here? All right, so he is a U.S. citizen, so he's entitled to due process. The hidden premise here is that all citizens of the U.S. are entitled to due process. So it's missing that premise in here. All right. Here's an example. I'm going to show you a video right after this. So this was an actual quote done by Lloyd Bentsen towards Dan Quayle. Y'all, this is super old. This is like 1988, as you can tell with my old ass friends videos. I'm surprised I don't have Golden Girls in there. Anyway, so back in 1988, Lloyd Bentsen, y'all don't need to know who he is, was talking to Dan Quayle, who was in a vice presidential debate. And Lloyd Quayle said to Dan Quayle, "Senator, I have served with Jack Kennedy and I knew Jack Kennedy. Jack Kennedy was a friend of mine. Senator, you are no Jack Kennedy." With the missing premise being that Jack Kennedy was a great man, but you are not. Okay, see how it's missing that little bit of an example, that thing that tells us truly what you mean to say. It's not there. We're making assumptions with entomemes, okay? That is our problem. So I'm going to show you really quick a video with another example in which they kind of mock the Dan Quayle statement. And this was from Seinfeld episode in which the gymnast, whom was trying to hook up with, Jerry Seinfeld, who is a comedian. And so the gymnast here is trying to explain why Jerry Seinfeld is not a comedian. And she says, "In my country, we speak of a man so virile, so potent, that to spend a night with such a man is to enter a world of sensual delights most women dare not dream of. What's it say? This man is known as a comedian. You may tell jokes, Jerry Seinfeld, but you are no comedian." The assumption here being that a comedian's good in bed. All right. Okay. Go ahead and take a look at that video and we'll come back for more.